Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. This is Brendan Hausler with EVOQ Bike. Today I am super excited to have Debbie Milne on. She is a 9-time national champion. She's also a sports nutritionist. She co-founded Supra, and we just talk about a lot of different topics that can help you optimize your training and racing through her experience. This is a really good one. Everyone has a unique perspective, and I really loved hers and seeing the big picture of cycling in our lives. Debbie, thanks so much for doing this. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Hit me up if you have any questions, and we'll talk to you soon.
I know. Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
It was good. I was up at North Carolina at my sister's place. It was a little chillier than it is in Florida. So shortened rides, trying to be a good family member. It actually created a little bit of, for the first time ever, a little bit of like friction. And I was like, guys, I do this all the time. The bike's here. It's getting ridden. Yeah. So, I
know it's like, sometimes I'll bring the rollers and, I'm thinking of my family, my mom and dad, and they're not very active. So they know I race, but like if they say, hey, let's watch a movie, I'll be like, I'm just going to put the rollers behind all you guys. And they've learned that I was like, please understand, I'm still enjoying the movie, but even if I'm doing something, it's better than nothing, So.
Yeah. The big thing with me was we were eating at 1 and the perfect time to ride was in the afternoon. It was 27 in the morning there. And I'm not doing that. And the one complaint was, well, you used to do that when you lived in upstate New York. And I was like, well, that's why I moved. So it was just a little bit of friction, and it's all good. So
I know. It's in the end, they usually will forgive you. And, my family's not healthy. So, I could argue that, that I'm actually, if I'm trying to do it to make money or it's part of like something I do for a living, I mean, surely they can understand it. I figure they just have to, I guess.
And that's, it's gotten to the point where for coaching and, a lot of the stuff we do with social media, I'm like, I have to be riding. Like that's part of what motivates people is they see me putting in the work that I'm asking other people to do, or I'm talking about go do these types of rides. And if I'm not doing them, why would anybody else do them? And
yeah, you're right. If you don't like modeling something can help people change their behaviors. I tell you, like, I know November I've learned, and I'm not so much needing to make money, the money that I used to make to do this. But anyways, I know November, it's just going to happen. People are going to visit. Like my daughter comes into town. I'm like, well, I can't leave her for a 4-hour ride. I've just finally decided I have zero, I just need to ride some, whatever it is. But I'll get messages from people I don't even know that's like, Milne, what's wrong? You haven't been on the bike for 2 days. And I want to say, I'm like, don't worry, I'll catch up. It's like family time. I'm sorry, to let you down, but I'm not coaching anybody. So I don't think they have any, it's like, why? It shouldn't matter, but that's what they expect me just to be going out and doing these hard ass rides all the time. And
I even had my rest week going. So I was like, I'm going for a 2-hour ride. It'll be nice and quick. You guys won't even miss me. So yeah, it's funny, but well, I appreciate you sitting down and doing this. It's last time I heard you speak was down at the Red Bluff Gran Fondo, and
that's right.
Just your background and being clinical dietitian and wellness dietitian, and if anyone is in the Southeast, they know your name from racing. You crush it. So I appreciate you kind of just shedding some light, pulling the curtain back a little bit, and we'll definitely inspire some more racers, men and women, to just keep going after it. So let's just jump in. So everybody, welcome to the EVOQ Bike Podcast. We have Debbie Milne here today, and I usually like to let the athlete introduce themselves, which I'll do, but I just want to preface that I know, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, you've been racing for over 20 years, which is massive. Over 100,
over 20 years.
Hold on. And over 180 wins and 4 Masters national titles. So that is like the wow factor for everybody to try to. Most people won't even do half of the races that you've won, which is incredible. But I'll let you. Who is Debbie Milne? That's the first question.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's a good question. I used to think I'm mainly a mom, but no, I'm a mom, and I'm also someone who loves cycling. When I found it, I've done it most of my life. just as a kid, it was a vehicle to get places, college, a vehicle to get to class. And then somehow you find out about racing. I don't know if we'll talk about that. I think that was one of your questions, but yeah, I mean, I think of myself as a cyclist. I will always ride a bike, even if I'm not racing. But I did, get a college degree in education, and I'm a registered dietitian. I've been board certified in sports nutrition, and that's something. When you get that board certification, you have to take an exam every 5 years, just to show that you've been working with people and that you've been up to date with, just current research and trends. I'm due to take that. So officially right now, I had to get a certain number of hours. But anyways, I'm a sports nutrition consultant and a wellness dietitian. My master's is in health promotion, and health is really important, not just your physical health, but your social, your mental health, your vocational health. They throw intellectual and spiritual health in there. And that is basically, I love that. I love wellness, and people finding that balance in all those areas of health, because it's hard. You can work on one of them or be so tied up in one of those areas that it absolutely always affects all the other areas. Kind of like when you travel for Thanksgiving and you have your emotional connections and social connections with your family, but your vocation is cycling, or so trying to find that balance, what you want to do and how you try to balance, putting enough effort into each of those areas affects each other. So I really love health promotion, but I started racing cycling, pretty much to make money for my kids. And I did do a lot of races, and I know it's might be over 180 wins. I counted them once, and I should have had that down there, but I've won 9 Masters National Championships.
So I could have sworn that it was off your team. Maybe it was an old team website. And I was like,
it was probably old, and I'm bad. I mean, I'm very proud of them, and I go around and I update them in different places, but it seems like 4 seems to be the number most people will stick with. Like it sticks in their head.
Yeah.
Because I hear that a lot, and I'm like, well, it's actually 9 now after this past summer. And I do have 1 Masters National Championship. Yeah, I know that. Believe me, it's hard to win them for different reasons. I think it's a little, maybe a little harder for men because the competition pool is much bigger, but it's always hard. Like I tell people,
hard. Don't take anything. Yeah.
It just takes one person who is prepared better for you, feeling better than you, knows the course better, lives at altitude. Just one person can keep you from getting the only prize in that race,
and the other thing is to hit 9 when you line up, guess who has a bullseye on their back? Yeah. I can only imagine the number of races you've been in where people will apologize. I mean, I'll have people that roll up to me and be like, hey man, must be horrible to be marked. I'm like, that's just racing. It's up to me to figure out how to still win. And I said after the first one, I said the second one is going to be way harder. And just because they will expect you also to be the one who cares the most about what other people are doing, because you can win it. And so the burden might be on you. Well, you can win it. Like if you don't want this to go down the road, but sometimes they just look at you especially in a smaller women's field. The fields in all those 9 championships have ranged from maybe, I think the smallest field might have been 11 and as much as 25 or 30 women. Mm-hmm. So it's sometimes they don't know each other, but as time goes by, they do begin to know who you are when you show up, and you stalk everybody or at least I can, because there's 15 people to look up, and I look up what they've done and try to see what they're doing, and I respect everybody that comes, and I try to figure out who's the most important people to watch. So I'm sure people do that too. Yeah, for sure. And even the men's, though, we've had small fields for the Masters Nationals at 35 plus. And this past year in Albuquerque, we were waiting for results to come through. I was waiting for a friend's, and I was refreshing the feed, and I noticed 60 plus had about, I think, 45 or 50 racers. And I was like, I want to be in that race. That has so many people. So a true road race. You said something that was actually very interesting when we're talking about wellness that I want to go back to. It's this all-encompassing many factors of wellness, not just physical. How do you see cyclists, where we're so maybe a little too obsessed with hitting watts and workouts? And I know a lot of people that definitely overlook the racing side of things versus the physical make me stronger side of things. And that's just within cycling. Do you think having a passion like cycling or an endurance sport can almost be a hamper to finding this wellness balance between everything? Well, and how have you focused on that in your own life, being someone who's super successful at this sport? You know what I mean? It's just like, maybe we're too obsessed with cycling.
Well, it's not a legit like experiment to like, if I take a look and reflect on what I did, but I did come up during a time when there really weren't power meters, and maybe some people looked at their heart rate and, or something like that in a race, or maybe there were power meters, but we're talking 20 years ago. So I never used anything like that. I raced and trained on how I felt. And there were some shortcomings of that, of always pushing myself. And because for me, it was a matter, can I go harder right now or not? That was mainly what even in training, I'm like, I would always want to train for average speed. I lived in Mississippi. I lived in Birmingham for a while. But once I started racing, a lot of it was in Mississippi. And so I basically would go out, I would say, how many miles can I get? And what's the highest average speed can I come back with? and to me, it was, I got really in touch with how I was feeling. I'm sure there were numbers that would go along and that was one way to train, but this is me in my ignorance. That's just what I did. And then I learned later, about some structure, and some structure is probably good. Talking about that balance, I had a mentor who I was like, well, what do you do to train? I was doing pretty good. He goes, well, you need to take some rest days, because I wouldn't do that. And I found out later my rest days weren't really rest days, but in my mind they were. So he gave me a schedule, like Monday rest day, Tuesday practice on sprints, Wednesday would be intervals, Thursday would be like a long tempo ride, Friday you'd rest, and then Saturday and Sunday you just go out to group rides, just do the hardest stuff you could think of, kind of like race imitation, type of things. And I did that, and my goal was to get as many miles as I could and follow that pattern. But it was real simple after that. I would structure my day and get up early, whether it would be on the rollers or, when my kids were older and my oldest could wake up and, start school. I homeschooled, I could get back, I could get a couple hours in, but I never really looked at numbers so much. And, but I learned like when I could go harder. I mean, I could tell you, like, I could tell by how I felt when, I could take a guess and go, man, I bet my heart rate's about 170, and I'd always be right, like whatever I would feel. So I really learned how I was feeling, and I learned when I could do more or not. And then I think that I never limited myself, because I wasn't looking at numbers that might tell me, can you really do this? You know what I'm saying? Or should you be doing this? So it was pretty carefree. Once I got off the bike, I could be free, for the rest of the day, to do other things in that whole balance of health, to not have to think about these numbers and worry, because it'll come back in your head. It's kind of like weighing yourself every day. If you're focusing on weight, if you wake up every day and weigh yourself and it's not what you want to see, it just sets your tone for the whole day. Maybe your attitude or your mood, or whether you're going to eat appropriately or not, and everybody's weight changes every day. I think it's kind of like when you over focus on food, that you become so obsessed with it that your mind is caught up in that activity of assessing what I ate, or was that accurate, that you just don't have enough time to be present with people. Sometimes they're even talking to you. You're lost in this world of that wasn't, I don't know if that meal was perfect, or one might think, oh, that workout wasn't like the best workout, because they overlooked the numbers. But I don't use numbers, so it's hard for me. I always
You still don't train with power?
No, I don't train with power, only because I'm over 50 now. And by the time I might have trained with power, my son Micah was coming along. And so anything expensive that we could buy, it would be for him.
Okay.
Like a time trial helmet or a power meter or a really nice computer So I did
awesome.
Never train with power. Yeah.
So let's talk about the nutrition stuff. Let's dive into that. I mean, this is your background that you're in. Talk about that mentality with food and athletics. And when you had just said something of not being present in a conversation, I remember I had when I was first starting and trying to understand macros more, I came into cycling knowing nothing about nutrition. And I've said this on a podcast before. I remember I got Bicycling magazine and I was reading about what was a carb, what was a fat, what was a protein. I'm like, okay, this is this. And like, oh, carbs are what I need to eat to like go hard and da da da. And so I had done calorie counting before, which I'm not a fan of. It's the exact opposite of listening to your body. And it would send me down this, if I went out to eat, and not being able to know exactly what I'm supposed to be logging drove me nuts. Like it threw off the whole day. The calculation was not perfect. And I had tried weight. I did everything. I was like, I'm just going to go into this and try and see what people are doing with this. So when you mentioned not weighing yourself every day, what do you think is a big picture overview of a healthy athlete that might be trying to lose weight? How often should they be? How should they start thinking about this? Because it's very daunting to people saying, geez, okay, where do I even start? Let's say I need to lose 10 pounds. Mm-hmm. Just talk about that a little bit.
Well, and if I'll give advice as a dietitian, I suppose. Generally, if I run into someone who needs to lose weight, or they say they need to lose weight, I'll find out, I'll do an assessment, where's their BMI, they're a healthy weight right now. So, why do they want to lose weight? Do they think this will increase their performance? And so I let them know, like, especially if they're at a healthy weight, I'd let them know, right now you're at a healthy weight. So change, and if they're eating, and I'll look at their eating patterns. If they don't feel like they overeat, or, they're not restricting. And I might say your body can probably, I know your body could weigh within a range, a different number of like a range, let's say within 5 pounds or maybe 10 pounds, but let's say they really do need to lose weight. So I'll say, okay, I can understand, you're healthy, your food choices look great. But you feel like you would climb better and, have better power to weight ratio. Okay, I get it. So for performance reasons, that might be a reason why you might want to change your body composition. Most people don't want to lose muscle, right? They'll start immediately thinking of losing fat. So what I'll do is I say, well, I can help you. And this is what I tell them. I'll come up, I'll do some numbers. We have some equations that help us figure out, and depending on if they're already under eating, that's difficult, because their body might already be like in a slower metabolic rate and making some adaptations for underfeeding. And it may be very difficult for them to lose weight without undernourishing themselves.
So sorry to jump in. That is, and I've heard people talk about this, cutting too much is not a good thing. Is that correct?
That's correct, because the body will eventually it'll fight back. Weight loss is reading the food environment as being scarce, especially when it's too excessive. Like I've worked recently with someone who was, for example, like they were following a macro program, and this person isn't the only one. I see it so often, and it'll come up with probably a reasonable calorie cut for them, maybe 500 calories less a day. And it's always better to lose weight out of season, or to intentionally try to lose weight out of season, and to do it appropriately. Generally, you bump up the protein per kilogram, just to kind of preserve that lean muscle mass. And then it's about a 500 calorie cut. You could, but I'll see people who will take that number, give it to them, and then they'll still try to do better than that. I'll look at their food records and I'll say, well, you already had a calorie deficit, goal for meeting this one nutrition goal. So you're not only, when you don't meet that, you're actually taking away more calories from that. So safely, I would say if you could, most of these apps would give you a Mifflin-St. Jeor, a Mifflin-St. Jeor equation is just a way to estimate how many calories you burn at rest, or just that you burn in a normal day, not including the physical activity. You asked me a complicated question, but the way I do it is I say, okay, what's you not training? Okay. What do you mow yards for a living? Do you sit at a desk? And I'll come up with what their calorie needs to maintain their mass and, protein, carbohydrate, and fat as an athlete, the kind of athlete they are. And I'll say, okay, we need to meet those first of all. Okay. And if you want to lose weight, we can take some away from that. We can take 500 calories away from that. And that might reflect in your meals. But when you're training, you've got to add more calories for that. And I'm a proponent of in your training to, take what you need before, during, and after to be able to complete the training and then do, help your body recover. When you do that, you're going to add a certain number of calories every day just by following sports nutrition guidelines. And there are no cuts there for me. I don't say, well, just don't eat while you're exercising. I'll have them continue with it, because your body makes adaptations to, absorbing the food and tolerating the food, and you can train your gut to be more efficient at that. So you don't want to cut the calories there while you're training. That's my approach. I'm not saying some days that you can't, there's a lot of approaches where people will sometimes train low carbohydrate, but, just sometimes on an easy day, and then higher carbohydrates on a hard day. But most people I meet, if you want to put them in a box of, like you said, of just obsession, then you would give them a workout like that. Maybe somebody's going to the Olympics and they really got to nail this, and this is their life and it's all they think about anyway. Maybe some of those nutritional periodization strategies, like training the body to store more carbs and stuff, might be a good approach. But for your average athlete, to me, it's really simple. I say you have needs that you need to meet just because you're you and you have a job and you do that every day. And then you have needs that you need to meet because you're an athlete, and the better approach is to put that food, that extra nutrition around the exercise. And if the exercise is long enough, think about it. If you train 3 or 4 hours, you're going to skip a meal, like you're going to miss a meal. So that's when the longer training hours you have to decide, okay, maybe I will bump up the meal before that a little bit, or have have 2 recovery, like 2 recovery snacks. And that nutrient timing, that nutrition in throughout the day is the art of it. When you work with someone and look at their schedule, when do you work out? Do you eat right before you work out, or are you going to follow up right when you finish? Are you going to go somewhere and eat, and then try to say, okay, so you ate dinner, but could you fit something in here between dinner and bedtime? And it is good to go to bed, not having eaten for a couple hours, just so you can really have a good fast while you're sleeping. But then I tell people, I give them portions that would meet that. And that's why I think working with a dietitian might be helpful for someone trying to do that. Because if you undereat too much, again, you're going to slow your metabolism. You're going to become frustrated, and you might even get increased feelings of hunger where you find you're just binging, and you can't help it. And you shouldn't feel bad about yourself, because that's very natural. So I will give people portions based on what I know their carb and protein numbers I figured for them. And I teach them how to build a plate like that. And I tell them, maybe measure it first for something like not a slice of bread, but like potatoes, and see what it looks like, get a good idea. Then when you know what that visual looks like, that these are good portions for me, then you eat slowly and you let your body give you some feedback. Like if you're still hungry, maybe get some more, or even if you leave 5 or 6 bites behind, but you're really, I'm full, I'm pretty satisfied, then just leave it behind. And that natural process of listening to, wait, I'm still a little bit hungry, or, this is just too much, I'm too full. Then you're not, because even if you measured your food and people really tried, they're not going to nail the exact numbers they hope to nail. Right. If you go to wherever, I'm going to make up like Burger King and get a hamburger and they tell you it's 650 calories, it could be 700 calories or it could be 600 calories. Right. So sometimes eating slowly and leaving it, just trying to do that can help you take that with you the rest of your life, or if you stop cycling, and stop doing,
I'm screwed.
Do you count all your calories?
No, I'm screwed if I stop cycling just because I'm used to eating so much food. And guys, know what? Debbie's not telling you to go to Burger King. I've had a couple people that are like, okay, no more fast food. I'm like, why is that even in your diet? It's not good. There's so many better options.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you a little bit about that, because any dietitian listening, I'll get a bunch of messages if I don't say this. Is in our field, we really teach people. I'm not so stringently saying all foods are good, like if sharing pizza with your family, it will build another area of health. Having pizza one night is not going to derail what you do 80 or 90% of the time. I personally don't like how I feel after I eat a Whopper. And that's what I have learned to focus on, is like, was that really worth it? Did I really like the taste of it? But if my daughter came and said to me like, hey, and they don't do this anymore, but when they were little, like they say like, well, can we go get a hamburger or Whopper? And, I'd be like, well, okay, it's a treat. We don't eat that every day. So, I would share that experience with them, but feel like crap usually afterwards. So that is not the bulk of my fare, but I do take about an 80-90% approach, so that like if I go to my parents and they don't really cook that healthy, that I don't create all this strife with them, because I realize they're not going to change. I hope my parents aren't listening to this, but they.
I won't tag them on social media.
They're probably not on it, but no. But they have pretty good nutrition. I would say that they have a lot of vegetables and things like that. But there's things I don't eat, like trans fats and like a lot of sugary things when I'm not on the bike. I don't eat a lot of that.
I mean, that was my sister's thing at Thanksgiving. I ate a piece of this like apple cake, and she was like, I told you I'd get you to eat sugar. And I was like, I don't, my life was very different before I found cycling. I was very unhealthy, just nothing like I am today. And I'm glad that I found cycling because it made that change. Mm-hmm. And I made the mistake of, once I saw the positive changes that were happening in my life, I got a little bit on my soapbox with my family. There was a little bit of strife, and I probably stepped out of line and trying to, all of a sudden I think I'm doing the right thing and I need to tell everybody about it, which is obviously not the way to do it. And so I think there's still a little bit of that residual, no one else is an endurance athlete. No one else is waking up to ride 3 hours. And so they look at it differently than me. And I just try to, like you said, if they're going to have unhealthy choices, I don't say anything about it. I try not to jump into it. But man, when I'm there and there are plates of cookies and this is sweet and that is sweet, and it is just, I'm just like, oh my God, I got to get out of this room. Like, it is hard for me because the old me is just like, just eat it all. It's a funny time for sure.
Well, do you like, I used to, I guess I haven't told you this. I used to actually have an eating disorder. It was bad. I just didn't eat. Protein was, protein and fiber, they were like the good foods. And basically like, I remember for the longest time, like just wouldn't eat anything sweet at all. And the problem was then it was a bad relationship with the food. If I don't eat it all the time now, it's not because I feel like I can't, it's just, I really don't want to. It doesn't, I mean, it's sure it's, if you have ice cream, like, oh, maybe I'll eat a little, but, it doesn't, generally it doesn't give as much to eat too much of it. Like, I usually don't feel good. That has been the biggest game changer. It's not that I can't eat it. I know from what I've studied, if I ate that all the time, I would feel awful. And I also know from, nutrition patterns that would be unhealthy, so it's really hard to find a place where like, I can go to a place and there's tons of sweets and I never thought I'd be there, but I'm just indifferent. I may want to try it and I may not. And, and I think that's just getting recovered from having an eating disorder, which was so bad, that it was fun trying to find a way to have a peaceful relationship with food, to not fear it at all, and just make objective decisions, about like, sure, I could eat that and it would taste good. But, I also know that the more I eat it, the more my brain likes it, and I'll probably eat more and more. And then I'm going to feel awful. I never beat myself up anymore or go weigh myself the next day to see what I weigh.
Hell no.
No, heck no. I just sit with the consequences of like how I feel. Was that a good decision? Did I eat too much? But it took me a long time to get here, like a long time.
Oh yeah. Well, people want this change, especially newer endurance athletes. They want to get to where they're at, to super lean, have no crave, be perfect in a year. And people think that I get these emails and comments like, oh, you probably wouldn't eat that. And I put on Instagram, like, me and my husband, Chris, we eat pizza. I recently did, one of the coaches, Craig, had proposed no sugar except for when riding. And that has been a game changer for me. So it has really helped keep weight fluctuation down, keep cravings down. But my mindset more, I don't miss that stuff because we don't buy it now. And unless I'm in a room surrounded by it, and cookies and potato chips or French fries are my weakness, that is what I would just love to go crush. And it's going to happen. And I tell people, don't burn so many mental matches not eating it. But think about it. I said in a podcast, go take a bite of it, walk into the room, ask yourself, how good was that? Do I want more? Or was that just a fleeting feeling? You tasted it. They say even things like coffee, if you smell coffee, sometimes it crushes your craving. You don't actually want to drink it. And so I think there's other methods of dealing with that. I don't want an athlete to be so distraught over the thought of eating a piece of cake that they are just unhappy the whole time. Go eat the freaking piece of cake. Just make sure you go ride your bike. If you feel good about it, great. But there's also then the opposite of, you eat one cookie, now you think you need to eat 10. And so trying to stay away from that. But it's such a learning your own body. It's such a long journey. And that's what I think is really interesting with it. I'm still learning and still trying to get better at it. And as I get older, trying to make smarter choices, I'll be 40. So I always laugh when my friends who are older than me are like, oh, after you hit 35, it gets hard. I'm like, whatever, guys. And now I'm seeing, I pay the price more, and that's it's just nothing.
So how old are you?
I'm 39. I turned 40 in January.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I turned 50 a couple of years ago. I just turned 52, and people always told me that as well. Like, oh, wait till you get older. And I can tell you, like, it really isn't. If you eat on a regular basis, this is what I tell people. If you have structured eating, like I'm not a big fan of like fasting for long periods of time. I'm about waking up, and your cortisol levels are already high because you've been fasting through the night. I'm about having just something and stop that starvation worry that your body has. Like, it doesn't know when you're going to eat again. So like if you eat in the morning time, it could be within 2 hours of waking, if you want to fast a little bit longer, but usually then eating every 3 to 4 hours. For one, that is great as an athlete for recovery, to bolus in protein, and especially like carbs if you're trying to restore glycogen levels. So you have the structure say, I'm going to eat every 3 or 4 hours. If it can't be a meal, then that means it needs to be a snack. And so then I'm going to, having learned what good portions are for me, I mean, maybe a person does need to learn that, because maybe this has so been blown out of proportion, they have no idea. And then someone who can do those numbers and say, hey, this is an estimate. Let's start with this. If you build your plate like this, eat slowly, enjoy it. And if you're really full, if there's just like the last third of a sandwich, you don't have to finish it because you think, oh, these are all the calories I get to eat, when your body's like, exactly. Man, I'm full. Yeah. So I would just say, just leave it. Because the other golden rule is, if you get hungry, and you're not going to eat soon, that's your body saying, I need something, so I try to respect that, when I'm going to eat every 3 or 4 hours. And if I'm hungry, I'm going to have something, even if it wasn't planned. If you follow, and then you have a balanced plate, you got healthy fats. And I am a proponent of 80 to 90% of the time picking foods that help your body function and age well, and prevent, disease or inflammation in the body. So if you mainly eat the healthier fats, and, I say the less refined carbs, probably your friend that said no sugar, or the goal is I'm going to limit my refined carbohydrates and my sugar intake to the time surrounding my workout. I mean, for one, that's a great time to get like a treat. If you're out with your friends and they stop by the bakery, you could get a sticky bun if you like it, or something, or a cookie, because that your body's going to use it really fast as you go and finish riding home. But if you do that, if you build balanced meals that eat every 3 to 4 hours, and if you quit cycling, your weight would stay within a natural range for you, and it wouldn't fluctuate wildly. It's restricting that leads to binging. And especially when we feel guilty about it, and then we say, oh, well, I'll make up for it tomorrow by not eating, I'll just barely eat. Then eventually by the evening, and I've seen this so much, so famished, and they, completely overdo it and binge. And that's a completely natural response to the body. And then the next day they say, oh, darn, I blew it. And they go back into that cycle. So I don't think it has to be hard if you, if you, again, eating healthy foods that make you feel good, and having a balanced plate, eating every 3 to 4 hours. And believe me, your hunger appetite hormones will come right in line with that. If someone spends a whole day not eating, and eventually, they're not going to feel hungry, their metabolism will slow down, and, and they just do this minimalistic eating. And I tell people, even if they're good on the bike, and I mostly relate to the bike, I have ran and done other things. I'd say, even if you're really good, how do you know that that's your best? Because believe me, when I was trying to live on 800 calories a day, I made some pretty good accomplishments. I won my first 2 national titles while still struggling with this, back in 2009 and 10. But I went to a lot of elite national championships where, I got 7th or 6th, and I'm watching the people finish, and I'm a stone's throw away from them. Like, I'm there, I'm like, they're 5 seconds ahead of me. And I keep thinking, if I had supplied myself with more of those carbohydrates, that you really need when everything gets really fast at the end for the finish, how could I have done? I don't know, but I can't go back and get those years back. So I usually say, just feed your body what it needs, and then the weight, and then respect things like hunger and fullness. And then on the bike, you have to eat ahead of need. You have to eat before you feel like you need it, or you're not going to have those carbs coming into your bloodstream to start taking over when the glycogen stores are just like starting to tank and get really low. and low glycogen stores can even affect muscle function. So, a carbohydrate is probably the thing people compromise the most, I think, when I run into athletes, just following that low carb diet, trying to lose weight and get skin, thinner.
I'm stronger over skinnier. That's what I hope people take from some of our channel is not into trying to be emaciated. That does not win a bike race, especially when people, I should say only about 60% of our listeners are from the US. We have a pretty decent UK and Western Europe crew. And so they have some longer climbs. And granted, out west, Colorado, there are races with, longer climbs than 15, 20 minutes. But, the power to weight thing is important, but I think it's blown out of proportion for amateurs in the US when they're trying to compare themselves to European pros. I'm like, guys, you're not doing the same races. Stop thinking that way. And thankfully, riders like Peter Sagan have come out, and now there's pros that actually talk about the fact that they're in the gym and they're doing some cross training. It's not just lose weight.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's been huge. I'm glad that message is getting out these days. And kind of, this is a good shifting point, I think, to training. What do you think is a really big, wide open question? What do you think is one of the most important aspects of your training through the years?
I tried to write a note because I was like, what would that be? I used to say, please, nobody, I'm not an expert and I'm not a coach, but I used to say nothing works like miles.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's what I would say.
Like,
I would say nothing more. And maybe someone could translate that into hours, because where I live now, it's a lot harder to get the miles than it was in Mississippi. I live in Greenville. It's about 100 to 200 feet of climbing of elevation for every mile or something like that.
So I've done the massive change of 100-mile rides were 10,000 feet in North Carolina, and now 100-mile rides are about 600 feet in Florida. So it's quite different.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, in a way it's kind of nice because, because when I used to train, the most important aspect, over the years, I'd have to say it was always about getting as much as I could train. Now it doesn't necessarily mean average speed rides, like as hard as I can ride, but whether it's just, that trying to keep my heart rate right around 145 or 150, not an average, but like right around there, what I call base miles, for a long amount of time, like not riding super hard all the time. But, if I just did intervals every day, and just an hour of intervals every day, I don't think I could do some of these harder races, even in a criterium. That's what I think. This is what I found. The things that work for me is that I get those long miles that not necessarily just killing it at any point on those. Sometimes we just go hard in the climbs, but going and getting those long miles, which maybe the heart rate is, if I look down, it's around 150 or 160 a lot. And then doing more intervals. I do more intervals now than I did initially. I used to only do intervals once a day, but when I'm at the beginning of the season, like when I'm trying to really get ready, I'll do intervals like 3 days in a row, which gets really harder by the third day. And then you have to rest. Like now it's like, I'm happy to rest. I'm happy to get up and only spin for 15 or 20 minutes and then spin again at night for 15 or 20 minutes after doing that. I won't continue to do intervals 3 days in a row for the whole season, but it's kind of like this thing where I build up to this level of fitness where, I've got all these base miles in, and once it's there, once you have that aerobic, I'm not a trainer. I won't say I'm a coach. I'm not a coach, but from what I understand,
you're self-coach though. So you're coaching somebody.
Yeah. I've coached myself. Yeah. I did have a coach. Like, I don't know, Andrew Crater, he taught me a lot about the intervals. I just made up my own intervals, and my intervals would be, they might be 3 minutes on, 2 minutes off, 3 minutes on. I think just whatever sounded good, 5 on, 2 off, 5 on, 2 off, 3 on, 1 off, 3 on, 1 off, 1 on, 1 off. I just made up neat numbers. Didn't even look at my heart rate. I just went as hard as I could. And he had me do it more structured, like way more structured, way less time resting, like way less time resting.
So let me jump back for a second. So when you're doing these 145 long duration average BPM rides, what is that percentage of heart rate max? Because people are going to hear this and wonder, because you said base miles, and that seems to me like it'd be more tempo riding, or how could we?
Maybe a way of look like a lot, like some people, I think it was was it Rebecca Rush who did Leadville so many years and did so good? Well, like you could go get testing done and find out what your threshold is.
Mm-hmm.
And then basically writing just under that. So you really build that mitochondrial base.
Okay.
And so those just not, so you have to go faster on the downhills and slower on the uphills and able to keep your heart rate there. I'm not an exercise physiologist, but when it was explained to me, it made sense. I was like, oh, if I create more mitochondria, then when I start asking myself to go into my aerobic system, as you know, pyruvate converts to lactate. Lactate builds up and the pH drops and you become limited, but it shuttles back to pyruvate, which can enter into the aerobic system. So the better your aerobic system, the more you can handle lactic acid. And I know there's a Cori cycle, it goes into your bloodstream and to the liver, but mainly it's that other system that if you have this really good aerobic base, then your tolerance to process lactic acid goes up. And I guess that's when like threshold levels may go up, but that's how I always train. That's why, that's also like what Andrew had me do, to go out, and he'd say, no, you don't go for an average speed ride, just a constant, like an average heart rate, but a constant heart rate.
Okay.
So, and that's mainly during the winter. That's why I guess I didn't do cross and stuff like that. That would get you back in that anaerobic system where you're basically, doing a time trial for, 45 minutes, an hour.
And to your point, that's even one reason why we're all taught, these VO2 max intervals. This is going to make you faster to raise your VO2 max. But part of that equation, as you're saying, is mitochondrial density, which is improved by endurance riding, this long base miles. So I don't think that is highlighted enough. And it's actually perfect time. I'm going to give our own blog a plug. I'm going to post a VO2 max article. And one of the workouts for VO2 max is ride endurance. It's not just about the cardiac pumping of your heart. It's what can receive it on the other end to actually create energy. In muscles. So it's been, I'm really glad to hear you say that. So, okay. So big miles, so then with my other question, which you kind of got into, was how do you gauge when you do the intensity? Is it just based on you wake up that day and you're like, I feel good, I'm going to go harder? Or is it this 3-day block at a specific period that you like to do? And now having trained for so long, you kind of know like, okay, well, my races are 10 weeks out. I'm going to start doing these 3 interval sessions a week. And then maybe like, you're probably so dialed that you've done this for so long that you might have forgotten what you're implementing. If you had to explain it to somebody, how do you know when to go hard? I think that's one piece that a lot of athletes miss. And
hard. Well, if you have a coach and he tells you not to go hard, that's not when to go hard, because he may know what you need. And if you have a coach and you're not feeling good enough to go hard, like I'm someone like, some people may not want to do the work, like they don't feel like it, but they could do it. And there's a difference between physiologically just that, it just like, I don't feel like this is going to do like things like your heart rate. It'd be real difficult to meet your heart rate targets, for example. And then you realize, you know what, I'm just not going to have it today. I might as well bag it and wait till I do have it and then have a really good high intensity workout. And it's not a matter about how you feel about it or whether it hurts. It's about the feedback you might get from like for me, like the only time I'm going to think of it like that is if I'm doing intervals and I'm expecting to hit heart rate targets. And it's just like, no matter what, I just can't hit it. It might be better to wait, or to settle for something 5 beats less or something. That's how I used to do it. As far as intensity goes, but I will say I used to never take a break. Like I never even got out of the big ring. Like to me, that was, if you got out of the big ring, you're not going to be strong.
You're getting weaker, Debbie.
Yeah, you never get out of the big ring. So the biggest benefit was when this guy in Tupelo, he was so sweet, owned a bike shop. He had raced in Indiana. He was like, no, he told me, you got to get in the small ring and just do a lot of high cadence spinning and, have your heart rate, not real high intensity. Like if we did sprints, we weren't allowed to get in the big ring. But he would say, do that for, until you get about, and this is him, 1,000 or 2,000 miles. And then you can start adding some intervals. And I've changed that. What I do is like, once I finish racing, I take November off, kind of like we talked about, just the holidays. And I know it's just not going to work for me. I got a family, I work. Then in December, we start the base miles of what I was talking to you about. So my pattern would be go out and ride a lot of steady miles. And we do that all through December. In January, we introduce like sprint zones, but that's still only 1 day a week, right? So the rest of that time, I'm still just doing the base miles. And then it's like our winter bike league, we have some sprint zones and such. And so, we'll do a little there, just mainly for the fun of it. And then in February, I start the intervals. And there's more intervals like in February, March, and I probably will do the rest of the year because the racing's starting, right? Yeah. So the intervals get me ready for those high intensity efforts. And I can tell you any more now when I ride, once it's in season, like if I'm not feeling good and I thought I was going to go out and do some big thing, I know it and I just don't plan to do it. I just don't plan to do it. And then sometimes I'm like, I'll just feel like it, so I realize I'm feeling good. And I'm known to, like around here, I might do something silly like 40 hill repeats on a Sleepy Hollow. It's like a 12% hill over here. And I just might do something maniacal like that because it's not hurting me and I feel like doing it and I have time to recover. So if I have a big race, I make sure that I get some of those. If I haven't been able to train as much as I want, I need to get those long miles. And then I need to start doing some more intervals again and give myself time to recover and not come into that event like just out of a rest week, if that makes sense.
Totally.
That's, Andrew taught me a lot about that and it's worked. I mean,
coming out of rest week, everybody feels kind of poopy and just dull and placing those. I think that was the biggest thing that I've realized in my error in training was I came up very much coached through the 2 hard days during the week. At first it was like a Tuesday and a Wednesday, and then endurance was Thursday. And then the weekend you did long endurance or you were racing. And kind of the rinse and repeat was, well, if you have a race that weekend, you would only do one hard interval session on Tuesday. But then if you did not have a race, you did 2 hard interval sessions during the week. The problem that I'm now seeing looking back was that by the time nationals happened it used to be the end of June all the time. By the time that happened in upstate New York, July was dead with racing. And then August, there was like a few up towards like the Catskill Mountains and then Green Mountain over Labor Day. I had no hunger for that. I was just burnt and I didn't really know why that was. And in looking back, I really think it was just too much traditional, got to do the 2 hard workouts, that by the time June hit, it had been now, like you're saying, start the intervals in February, March, April, May, June, 5 hard months. And it was just like, I didn't really care. The fire was sort of gone. Whereas now I've been working with Tom Bell, who's from the UK. And the reason I got him was, number one, he's a mountain biker, but he's really into the physiological side of things. And I wanted to get someone in Europe because I've always heard, these European coaches, they make you ride much easier. I'm like, maybe I've been riding too hard. And he's much less interval based, very pro volume, which is kind of my thing anyways. And I've never felt fresher and better for longer. And so I think just like you said, the intervals that you're doing in February, March is way more than you're going to do through the season. And that was my biggest misstep, I think, in kind of trying to do my own thing. So it's
I think that, if I think about it, that's exactly what naturally happened, because you start to come into this really good level of fitness and, and it's hard to stay there, like peak form. It's hard to really stay there. So trying to keep doing the intervals when you really don't, it's not going to pay off right there when you're doing it. You might have done, I think, like a couple of sets of really good intervals. You're like, man, I just nailed those, but no race that weekend, so then you go out, after a while, like, if you did race, like you said, you would, like, a lot of times when I race, I decide whether or not I can, I can go to Donaldson on Tuesday, which is like our Tuesday night worlds. Cause I'm like, I'm already broken from the race weekend. I know I'm probably not completely recovered. So if I go and do that at Donaldson, will I have time to even recover before we race again? So I think about how I'm feeling and have I recovered, and mentally how I'm feeling about doing it, like that's what I do now. When I was younger, I was just bullheaded, like, like, oh, you don't get fast if you ever go slow,
right.
Yeah. So,
question is, I'm looking at these questions. Do you have 10? Can we go 10 minutes longer? Do you have time?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm like, okay, if I have 10 minutes, I really have to be specific with the questions I ask. Have you, so have you ever read Stacy Sims' The Book Roar?
I've read summaries of it and like reviews because
Sure.
I when I worked full time and I just had very little time to read except for things pertaining to like medical nutrition therapy and
Right.
things like that. But I think she has a PhD in like exercise physiology or something like that.
I don't
And
know her exact background,
Okay.
but I've
But
heard
I
her
think-
speak. And the only
Mhm.
reason I asked you about this is can you comment all on like training through different hormone phases? Because I've talked to a few female athletes who are open to it, and some I'm like, hey, I get it. I'm a guy. If you don't want to talk about this, that's cool. And if you don't want to talk about it, that's totally
No,
cool.
I'm cool with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you,
Yeah.
so in trying to understand it and not being ignorant, being a male athlete, do you use different hormonal phases to train different things, or do you just go based on how you feel that day? Because, and I can't remember exactly which phase Stacy was talking about, where it's like you're not going to PR, or it's like another phase. That's when you should be focusing on PRs. And in talking to different female athletes, they've kind of had different responses. So I'm always curious, like, do you think there's a overarching rule that women can follow? So like, hey, you're in this phase, you should be doing this, or is it more personal? Like, figure out when you're feeling good, look at when you PR. Like, this is the thing guys don't obviously think about. How would you guide a newer cyclist who's trying to get into training to understand that, or what should they look for?
Well, I can say it's definitely something like, I mean, I got an app on my phone. Every important race to me, when it's coming up, I try to say, where am I going to be? Mainly because I know it's not that I changed my expectations, but I feel like, and her book says this, it is true. Like right after you start and like the week before, it's like, it's night and day compared to like the week before, or maybe a week and a half before. And so what I do is like, I know that I'm not going to feel as strong during that time frame, especially the week before, as I do the week, when you start, and then the week after. So what I do is like, I feel like I'm fortunate when a really important race falls in line with that, but there's nothing I can do to change that.
Right.
So I've learned, I'm always going to try my hardest, but I'm not going to think something's wrong, or, I'm going to realize I'll write that off as like, that probably wasn't the best I could do, but that's all I could do. Like, what choice did I have? That, like if a race happens, so I don't let it get in my head, I just realize all I can do is go out there and do the best I can do. And again, if you listen to your body, there are times where you are craving more carbohydrates, and she talks about it. So don't ignore that. And, if you're an athlete that's worried about weight, and, and you're, like that time I say you build your plate, but for some reason you're just feeling like, I'm dragging. Oh, I'm really dragging you. Well, you might need some more carbs. So I think she probably has a good point, because I definitely know the difference.
I think sorry to cut you off there. I think the great thing that you said though is like, it sounds like make the best of what you have based around real life, and something that guys or women can speak to. And you being someone that has a job where you're working full time and being a mom, let's take it away from the female athlete side of things. When I was selling medical devices, there were times where I was standing in the hospital till 7 p.m. and I was going to be going to drive to a race that started. I was like, oh, great. In 12 hours, I'm waking up for this bike race and I'm in the freaking hospital 3 hours from the start of the race. Like, that happens. We're amateur. Most of us listening to this are amateur athletes. And it's what you said of, not giving it your all. I didn't go to the race and just say, okay, whatever, but be kind to yourself. We can't always it's not always the perfect run up, and it's just try to figure it out. Go give it your best shot. I think that's an amazing message for everybody to hear. But and that is tricky. I mean, does that bum you out when you do you ever train less for, maybe say, well, that race is going to be where I'm not probably so hot. Maybe I should shift to something like an A priority race to something else?
No, my life is so, I know one of your questions you mentioned might talk about is like trying to fit in work, being a parent. I have to work with the time that comes up. I have to be flexible. Like some things when you can control things, you can set yourself into some good habits. But when your life has factors that you cannot control, then you got to use the opportunities that come up.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I'm not going to skip a race. That could be a good argument. I could say, hey, you know, for the effort to go and the competition that will be there, you know, is this even going to be fun for you? You know, is this even going to be fun for you if you know that this is not going to be a good event for you? And for some reason, it's never stopped me from wanting to go to a race. You know, it just never has, I guess, because I still just love to race. And I think maybe, you know, just maybe, maybe I won't feel as bad as I know I might feel.
Right.
And sometimes you can surprise yourself, you know.
Yes.
Sometimes you're like, oh man, I thought I'd do awful and I won the thing. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a race and there's probably, you know, thinking, God, you know, this isn't going to go well and I win. And then sometimes, you know, honestly, I know I'm feeling bad and I don't do as well as I thought. And I'm just, you know, I don't beat myself up. I have learned long ago. Like I used to tell, and I don't know exactly what this means, but I would tell people, it's like, you're really never as good as your last race anyway, whether you just did really, really well, everybody's, you know, or did really, really poorly, you know, every time you show up, it's like the new you that people are thinking about, you know, like, you know, and after a time that builds up, like if you start getting a lot of wins, then you get a reputation. But until, you know, if you consistently, you know, always go up and you keep working, then you might start getting better. Nobody will forever remember that you didn't do well at, you know, Sunny King, you know, or got popped out of a race.
Man, it's like people, there's always lines that I'm like, people are going to think I'm paying this person to say this. Like, because there was an athlete that wanted to go do a stage race and then was thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't go do the state road race. Do you think I'm going to be too tired? I'm like, no, it's going to be great. It's the week before, plenty of time to recover. You should go do this. You need more experience. And the past couple of weekends hadn't been amazing. So they're thinking, maybe I'm not ready for this. I said, it's the state championship. Just go, have fun. And they won. And they're like, I can't believe I almost didn't go to this race.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have to allow yourself to surprise yourself sometimes. And it's got to do the reps. And part of being good at bike racing is just getting bike races under your belt. You're going to learn something from every single race if you look for the lesson. And I think it's the ego too. We're in the social media world where everyone thinks that, well, Joeypants 24 is going to see on Instagram that I came in 7th. And if this had been the perfect week, maybe I could have come in 3rd because I saw this other person train on Strava and I'm probably better than him, but now I'm not because this happened. Maybe I just shouldn't go.
Yeah.
And I try to tell people, guess whose result everyone cares about at the bike race? Their own. No one remembers what freaking place you came in. And after 5 years, I can't even remember what place I came in my own races. So go have fun. And, you know,
no, I was telling, and I'm older now, I was saying there has to be something fun in bike racing that doesn't involve being on a podium because so many people don't get to do that. So if you're someone who's used to getting on the podium and then you might start to think, well, I think what I really loved was getting on the podium. Did I even love bike racing? If you can't still love it, you know, when you don't get on the podium. I mean, that's the way I think about it. Cause I'm at my age, there's not a lot of masters women's racing. So I'm still racing with people that are 20 and 30 and 40. So, you know, and I think, you know, there has to be something fun in this because I may not be able to manipulate this to the level that I could before, but I did my work. Like I did my work, you know, it's not like I just showed up. Like people would say to me like, oh, you make that look so easy. And I'd want to say, oh, it's just easy for you. You're going to win it again. And I was like, well, it's as easy as getting up every morning at 5:30 and being to bed on time. And if all of it, you know, and riding for 2 hours and suffering up this, if that's easy, then yeah, but winning a bike race is easy. You know, but just because I went out there and, you know, and it made that look easy, I was like, no, that, you know, that's not the easy part, you know, really represents a lot of work.
And it's you have to definitely love the process. And I think that's one thing that has changed for me. Of when I first started, it was always, you know, I was obsessed with trying to upgrade. So you're very results obsessed. If I didn't win, I was super disappointed. And I was I didn't really have many buddies that I was doing it with. So it's like I was driving 5 hours to this crit and then driving 2 hours to the road race on Sunday and driving home. And if you got 0 points, it was like, man, what am I doing out here? Like, I definitely like this because I'm doing it. Like, that was my weekend. Now I'm going back to work. But it is, I think the older I've gotten, I've been trying to, I think it's been through coaching people and just really trying to find something on that race weekend that is fun besides the race also, like something in the trip, something with the people I'm going with. It's the bike race weekend can be so much more than just what the podium delivers. And it's funny that you bring up the age thing. I'm feeling dated in the P1 races. And I told Andrew at the last race, I said, hey man, I love seeing you here because you inspire me to keep doing these races, because he hops in both. And because there's a lot of, I can only do now, next year I'll be able to do the 40 plus stuff, but usually there's only one race still. And
they're going to love that.
They're going to love it. I can't
They'll be like, why are you here? Why are you doing this? You did to Andrew. They're like, go race the pro.
The thing is, it is funny, I was at the last race this season was the North Carolina road race. And I'm looking around, I'm riding with these guys who are 20, 21. And after the race, I don't have much in common with them besides the bike race. And that's what somebody said to me. They said, you seem to really like Masters race. And I said, because I finish and these are my peers, So going to Masters Nationals, there is a different vibe and a different respect in that race. And everybody who doesn't race Masters wants to make fun of it. I'm like, okay, wait till you do it. Number one, there's just a different vibe. It's just that I first felt.
They're real settled, and most of the time, like, they want to wake up and go to a job the next day, and their identity, I don't think, maybe for some, isn't caught up in racing, or they wouldn't still be racing. So many people just stop because it's,
And you made a comment earlier that I feel like would you agree that you're cyclist before bike racer, or bike racer then cyclist?
I'm definitely like a cyclist. I mean, I absolutely love it. It's like therapy. It takes me places physically and mentally. I love racing because I like the mental aspect of trying to manipulate scenarios, or, like when I went to Masters Nats and trying to think outside the box, and seeing if it worked. I like that. I like a plan working. I don't like the arguments that we get in racing, that probably, the pettiness that comes out us as racers. That part I don't really enjoy. And as I get older, I get more snappy about it, but that's why it would be fun to be with Masters, because I don't think they get as, like, their feelings hurt as much, and they're experienced, and so definitely a cyclist before a bike racer. Well, what about you? You think you're
cyclist before a bike racer? I like racing. If I never raced again, wouldn't be a problem. If I could never ride again, I have a broken bone in my foot, the sesamoid. And it is just it's in the ball of your foot. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's so small they can't pin it or fix it. And so I broke it in 2012, I believe. And I was at Tour of the Catskills and almost was going to walk my bike the last 10 miles. My teammate actually pushed me, and I was like, okay, I need to go to the doctor. And had been kind of bothering me. Long story short, some surgeons will remove it and others are adamant about not touching it, because especially if you're under like 60, it can create a ton of foot problems. And so this guy finally said, he's looking at me, he's like, so I'm confused. Is this your job? Like, I know you're in medical sales here at the hospital. Like, what's your deal? I'm like, this is everything to me. And I told him, I said, I don't care if I can never race, but I cannot pedal 30 minutes without being on the side of the road. And it was like a hot, like someone just had a poker in my foot. And so, long story short, he finally convinced me. He told me to go get insoles. And I was like, dude, I've tried everything. Insoles. And he goes, go to this guy and tell him what I'm telling you and just try them. And so he heated up this insole and pushed his thumb in it and put it in my shoe. So it takes just a little bit of extra pressure off. I cannot feel it. It's crazy. And I've thanked this guy. And I walked in like, I need custom orthotics. I'm ready to spend $1,000, whatever I have to do. And the guy's like, yeah, $29.99. We're going to heat this up with a hairdryer and push my thumb in that. I'm like, this is
that's crazy.
Crazy.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Crazy. So if I ever saw that surgeon again, I would, because he's like, listen, I'm not going to take this bone out of your foot. You'll find a hack that will, but I'm telling you, do not do that. So anyways, I have 3 more big questions for you. Okay. And I don't want to take up your whole night. Okay. So this is a very popular question, especially with newer cyclists in the women's peloton, when you can sometimes all be grouped together. And I have heard Debbie's name come up. I'm a Cat 4. I have to go race Debbie Milne. And there's also this other hitter there and this other hitter. And I want to know, what advice would you give to women that are in that boat? Because sometimes it's a race where there's not much that they can do. They can't hang on at all. And their race is over in literally 10 minutes, the first climb. But, you know, it's a tough situation. Men don't face this problem. And it's a problem with the numbers there. It's a problem with certain promoters. It's, you know, and I don't know the answer. What do you think is the best way to approach these? Sometimes I say, hey, you just got to go and try to hang on as long as possible. And then, unfortunately, this is a race. It's not going to be a great weekend. Turn it into endurance ride and just get the miles in and go have fun. Like, you're just not there yet. But trust me, Debbie didn't get there in a week either. So you need to go ride and just see what happens. If there's not big climbs, or if the course isn't brutal, then maybe they can hang on a little bit longer. But how do you, like, what do the other women talk about? And I'm sure if we have like a 1, 2, 3 race, a lot of us are like, hey, let's just throttle this to get rid of the 3s and then we'll start racing. A little bit different dynamic though, because 3s are closer to 1, 2s than 5s are to you.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to them?
Well, I can say that a lot of the races, they don't put us all together, but they do some. Maybe regionally that's more like that. I think what you said is true. Like, first of all, I know it's hard because, you know, for one, if you spend your life comparing yourself to others, you know, like then you got to take other things into consideration. Like, you know, like, oh, I've been training a long time. Like when I came into racing, you know, if you just barely got started, that's not the best you're going to see. I mean, it really isn't. And hopefully, you know, like if they let you finish the race, you won't be alone probably, you know, like I would advise them, if there's other 4s in there, I mean, I would just say, get to know the women that are, you know, in the same boat as you. And then, you know, cause a lot of times if you get dropped off, you know, just looking back to see, oh, wait a minute, there's someone else and they're almost up to me, at least waiting for that person. And the 2 of you can work together, maybe catch the group again. Or maybe just have someone to ride with and just go as hard, just keep swapping licks and just ride as hard as you can, to make it a really good workout. I do think that when they added a 5, my understanding for the men was when they started out and it was only Cat 4. And then the sport grew so much, so they added a Cat 5. It's been a long time since I heard that, but I think they added a Cat 5 because the numbers were so large, but the numbers weren't that large for women in the Cat 4. So I'm not sure why they added a Cat 5, because now a lot of times, you know, they used to be able to at least do 2 races. You could do a 1, 2 and a 3, 4, 5. And I think when I was coming along, it was about like that. I mean, I'm not a 3, 4, 5, a 1, 2 and a 3, 4. And so the 3, 4 race, you know, then they'd feel like, okay, we only did 2 races. And you at least got some people that are still like at your level. The years I was coming along, for 2 years, they had a Cat 4 series only. And they guaranteed in this series that there would be races. And that was the beginner category at that time. They said this whole series, there's like 6 or 7 series in this. And we promise you'll have your own race. And that, I think, was a good way to, I mean, it takes a tough person to come out and think, you know what, even though I keep getting spit out the back and pulled from this race, I'm still good. And to men's credit, like I'm always amazed when 120 men line up and they know in the back, they know it's like, oh, I might get 10 laps, but they keep coming back, you know? So I mean, just to be tough and realize that doesn't mean you're not a good athlete. I mean, just coming out there and doing that, I'm sure they have women in their life who look at her and say, oh my gosh, you race bikes. You know, people, my friends who don't ride bikes and they don't race bikes, they think like, man, that is badass. You know, that's really tough. You go out there and, you know, sometimes it's in the rain and you might crash. So you are tough, you know, a woman to even come, and you may have to like, I would like to see them have their own race just because I know it's hard starting out. I like to encourage them, but I would say just try to get to know the people that are in the same boat as you. And, you know, maybe, you know, we used to say like, hey, if you don't like being started with them, you guys could just let the higher level women go down the road. The problem is you can't always get everybody on board with that, because all it takes is 145.
Exactly.
Yeah.
145. I'm getting the free ride as long as I can.
They're like, nah, you guys can way back here, but I'm not going to do it. So I would just say, realize that it's a process. And if you want something, and it takes work, like you really got to work on it. When I jumped into racing I'd been riding for years, like hauling my kids around in a trailer, like 180 pounds just to get them to the park. Like I said, it was a vehicle. So I had done a lot of work before I stepped into the racing scene, so I was super strong, but not savvy on tactics and stuff. So if it's important to them, then I would say stick with it, and just look for those small gains every race. Like the men do, like, oh man, I survived half the race instead of the first 5 laps.
People, and I don't know if this is the internet age or if this is the internet is full of the shortcuts to boost your FTP, and everybody thinks that they are going to be their best in 4 years. And the thing I've been trying to preach lately is where you're at. If you're 3 years into training, you are a newbie still. You think you know a lot compared to when you were year one, which is true. I laugh. And when I hit 5 years, I was like, oh my God, I know so much more than what I knew 3 years. And now I look back, I laugh at myself. And I have people that somebody asked me very recently, hey, so if I do 18-hour weeks, is that going to help me for next season? I said, yeah, but that's really more, they're 30 years old. I said, yeah, but that's going to set you up for when you're 35. And they're like, oh, well, I'm like maybe in this for another year. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, it's good to know that you have that timeline. You're never going to hit your best. And that's not a knock. That's just the reality. If you keep up with it, you're going to go so far down the road, but everybody wants it in. And that's the one thing I do like about social media is somebody said, I've been trying to just, like you said, you got to put in the reps, you got to put in the volume. And someone said, holy crap, man, you posted this video and I realized how many years you've ridden 10,000 miles. It's a lot of them. And I said, that's the only reason why I'm still relevant going on 40 in local racing. It's you got to just do the time. There's no shortcut.
We used to call that depth, like depth. You don't, there was a cycling quote that says you don't get really good at bike racing because you train hard one season. It's called the quotable cyclist. And there's all these famous cyclists that like, they'll talk about some topic, whether it's training or, I don't know, gas station stop. It's called the quotable cyclist, but in there, and I used to read it religiously because I was like you, I just wanted to know everything about cycling and what the culture was like. But I remember reading that once and I can't paraphrase it, but he said something like, you don't get really good at cycling because you train real hard one season. And then there's a second part of the quote that I can't remember, but it stuck with me. I was like, if I really love this, I got to find something about, like you said, the process of doing this. And believe me, like the guy who free soloed, El Capitan knew, he didn't just get into that sport,
right.
And do it in 3 years. Like he had so many things have to be automated and finessed, and this depth of strength build up, because being good at bike racing is also being smart about where to spend your energy and how to hide and how to get out of the wind. And not, there's a lot of things about it that until you've got that, like a non-thinker part where you just automatically do it, then you're going to be constantly thinking about, the wrong things or not knowing where to spend your energy and spending it in the wrong place, instead of looking for that just precise moment to say, no, I have to go with this. No, don't go with that.
Yes. And depth is something that's not a metric that we can easily talk about at the water cooler. I can tell you what my FTP is, but I can't tell you how many times I can do 120% of my FTP. Right. So it's like, it's just not an easy metric. And I had Cody Stevenson on a while ago and from Training Peaks, and it was great to hear him talking about just some of the things that we can't measure that are very important that a newer cyclist just isn't going to know to think about. And so just like anything, just experience is worth gold, and definitely in endurance sports. Okay, my last question, and I'll let you go. I appreciate you sticking around for so long. What do you think what are some tactics to use to maintain strength for any athlete as they get older? I've always been everyone's not into this, but I think lifting year round is a great thing. What's your thought on lifting, and especially as you got older, did that change at all from what you were doing earlier in your racing years?
Well, early on, I used to run every day. I just had kids and dogs, and we needed to run them on the trail. So I would run 1 or 2 more miles 1 or 2 miles a day, which was good for bone density. And that's what I was going to say.
Okay.
The weight training, and when you spend all this time in a non-contact, non-impact sport, you need, as you age, you need to maintain your bone density. So things like, or dancing, you could do things like dancing or running, but weightlifting does that too. So I always did core work, and I still do to this day, but I get so busy, like I got to get back into that habit of not missing twice, like I might miss a day and I got to say, okay, I missed a day. I need to recognize that. And I don't need to miss twice. Core work just means like abs and that sort of thing. But I always did like bridges for my lower back. And just because I felt like that helped me with climbing. This is an ignorant person's perspective of like, how can I be strong for climbing? Because I really wanted to do good climbing. But the weight training, I'll say, it's harder to maintain muscle mass as we age and harder to build it. So I would say like the weight training, I don't know if you had a routine, if it's lightweight training, maybe the legs, you don't need to so much train during the season, but the upper body and the core and, only if weight training interfered with a workout that you wanted to complete. But like typically I would do, I don't know if I'll get to do it this year, but I would go to the gym and do things like squats and fitness isn't really static. So if you lift a lot of weights and you don't continue to do it, your muscle mass will, decline again. So I just like something that's sustainable that I could do all year round that doesn't break me down that much, but just maintains what I have. And you fit that in on the best training day. Again, I'm not an exercise physiologist or a coach, but that's what I've done. Because, for me, like we just had to take down some trees in the yard. And I hadn't had as much time to do weight training as I had in the past. And that put me back. Like I'm still tired from it. I'm really still tired from it. And I thought to myself, it's really good for just overall health and even cycling. Like people don't realize how much your arms that you use, like in sprinting and climbing.
Yes. Here's your other $5 for that quote right there.
Yeah. Oh, good. Well, you know what? I'm just glad to know that I'm hitting some things right with my ideas.
I'm going to start calling you Coach Milne, because I think anybody that is out there, like you said, I love when people are like, well, I'm probably not the athlete that you'd want to work with. I'm like, I want to work with anyone that wants to get better. I was doing loser stuff in life before I found cycling. I would hate if a coach was like, sorry, you're not, nope, I don't want you.
Yeah.
And so anybody that wants to just try and improve as a human being, let's freaking go. And I tell everybody who's new, I'm like, you're the best athlete for me to coach. Like I can definitely make you faster. If you were new and you haven't been training, no problem. Yeah. Like
I promise you'll see some results.
You will see some results. The person that's really hard is when Owen Schott calls me and is like, hey, I've won 3 Masters National Champions. I'm going for 10. Give me 10 more watts. I'm like, damn, Owen. Okay. Like we got to really go to the drawing board on this one. So no, that's really good. And I actually, I got injured last year. I got too into lifting. And what I didn't follow was exactly what you said, something that was sustainable through doing the workouts that on the bike. And so I ended up injuring my QL, quadratus lumborum, and it ended up being, I was one of those things I was denying to myself, and I was on the side of the road about 45 minutes into a ride. I'm like, God, I need to go to a PT. This is not good. And luckily they figured everything out. And there was a guy through Strava actually who commented on another lifting post. He said, this is interesting that you would recommend lifting max. And I said, well, tell me, like, this is just what we have talked about, and tell me kind of your philosophy. I'd love to learn more. And we did a podcast, this guy, Matt Bickford, he does it based off RPE, never maxing out. And it has really just changed my perspective on what I need to be doing in the gym and not getting obsessed about, I'll be honest, I was lifting, and when I saw the gains in lifting, it was like a different kind of buzz. And I was like, ooh, this is actually pretty fun. Like, and I'm getting kind of jacked, and I've never looked like this. And that was kind of addicting. And so trying to remind myself, hey man, you're doing this to be a faster cyclist, not to win Mr. Universe. But it is very funny now that I'm in Florida. The gym I go to is very Mr. Universe. And so people look at me like, but I really enjoy it. It's like, these dudes are they are as serious about lifting as we are about cycling. And there's like a area to deadlift, and you have, because it has extra support so people don't mash through these guys are deadlifting insane weights. I want to be like, can I go deadlift over there? Because I promise you, nothing that I drop is going through the floor here. It's quite the place, but I need more of a muscle tee. I don't fit it in my
Well, you should come to Greenville, because like when we go in the gym, it's funny because you walk in and like you can peg a cyclist, and there's a lot of cyclists in Greenville, and I'm laughing because we're like, I know they're looking at us probably, and like, you got some work to do.
People will actually make comments though on my calves. They're like, yo, dude, what are you doing for your legs? And I'm like, I ride a bike a lot. They're like, oh man, because like you're not really big, but like your legs, dude. I'm like, I appreciate that. Yeah, ride a bike. They're like, so what are you doing? Like 30 miles? I'm like,
yeah, I know. Like, yeah. You're like, what's your longest ride? And if you tell them, they're like, no. I mean, they really think that you are absolute loony.
Yeah.
They're like, no, not 100 miles in
a day, in one ride. Yeah. Like, that's the gas station. You rode from where? And you're riding back? Like,
oh yeah, that's my favorite one. Like, yeah. Well, that's the only way to get home.
Debbie, this was awesome.
It was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Any parting words for the people that I maybe not anything I didn't hit on? I know I sent you. I usually send like 100 questions, and then I just sort of like, I like to just let the conversation flow. But was there anything that I missed that you were trying to get across to everybody?
No, just I would say if you really feel like you love riding a bike, just be sure that whatever you're doing, that doesn't feel so bad or so wrong, or you get to yourself a place where you don't love to ride a bike. I used to say this. I used to say, if riding a bike or racing a bike is a means to an end instead of the end, then you may one day find out that you really never loved cycling at all, or biking. So if you really think you love biking, just keep that in mind. Treat it as the end, not the means to some end, like, a means to people liking me, or a means to being better accepted by people. Like if your identity is caught up in your outcome in racing, then there may be a day that you just walk away from cycling. And it's such a wonderful sport. Like cycling is a wonderful sport. So don't let bike racing take you away from cycling. As much as I do like bike racing, don't let racing a bike take you away from cycling.
That's a really, I guess, I don't know if I've come across, maybe I don't see it as much. It's a really interesting, resonating with me so well, because I'm going to Vuelta, Ecuador in a week. And someone was like, you must be so pumped for this race. I'm actually going to stay about 5 days after. I said, it's weird. I'm pumped for the race, but I'm pumped that this family in Ecuador is coming to pick me up in Quito, and we're going to Ibarra, and I'm staying with this guy that my friend knows. And his mom is planning to like cook for us, and I'm going to go do these random bike rides. I'm actually more excited for that. And I was like, that feels bad. So I shouldn't say that, but it's, I don't know, the adventure, I think exactly, I think that's a really great point to end on. So,
well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. Look forward to seeing you next year at some of the races. And definitely Masters Nationals, is that the biggest goal next year? Or, don't you still do pro nats?
Yeah, I do. I do. I got in a
Savage. Break. Excuse me. So pro nats, I won't be there. I'm not invited to that. But if
you're not.
No, I'm only amateur. There was a team that I was maybe going to get on with, but there was some rule this year, I think, that you had to have like been on the roster for whatever. I don't belong in that race anyways. So.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, if you think it's a fun experience, I can tell you Knoxville's pretty cool.
Knoxville's cool. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think that course more specifically is probably not the best one. I don't know. I would go do the race if I could. But anyways, maybe in Albuquerque, I'll see you in the Southeast, but big races I'm thinking of. Do you think it'll be out there again next year?
I've heard that from people who I think know. So in my head, I'm thinking, oh, it's in Albuquerque, but until they announce it, I guess, you never know. I heard they made a lot of money, like $825,000 the city did from the revenue. And don't quote me on that, but I just in the back of my mind, I Googled to see if they announced it in Albuquerque, and I saw some article on how the city was happy about the revenue that was.
No way. So. Well, there's not much going on in Albuquerque. It was pretty quiet where we were. I know I'm going to try and stay up by the course next time. I was downtown and I was like, ooh, this is.
Did you do Sandia?
Mhm. I
You
did.
Yeah.
That was fun. That actually has me, riding that high it like hit 8,000. I'm like, okay, this is getting tougher. And it was a really funny power curve. Just slowly
I did
sloping
Pikes
down.
Peak in Colorado Springs, and you probably weren't there because you probably weren't old enough, right? Did you go to
Uh,
Colorado Springs?
well, 2, 3 years ago or 4 years ago.
2 years ago. Oh, yeah, 3 years
So it was
ago.
the Air Force course. I was there.
Did you ride Pikes Peak?
No.
That is like crazy.
How high does it go to?
14,000. And no, when you get to the top, you're like loopy. You're like, and there's no rails or anything. It's like crazy.
Well, so Volta Ecuador is going to 12,000, I believe. I'll be in the Gruppetto by then. Supposedly Richard Carapaz might ride for the national team. And I was like, wait, yeah,
Oh my gosh.
which would be incredible. I'm like, I just want to see the guy's Olympic gold bike and
Yeah,
just
just
say I
ride
did it.
beside him for a while.
Dude.
Say, I'm sorry, but I'm a fan.
Yeah, exactly. Debbie, thank you.
Have a great trip. That's
thank
when you going again?
I'm going on Sunday and the race starts
my
on
gosh.
Wednesday and it's 8 days, 7 days, 8 days, 8 stages. It'll be a doozy. It's going to be the biggest race I've ever done. So I'm pretty pumped for that. And just,
So exciting. Yeah. Good
we'll
luck.
Thanks, Debbie.
Have
I'll talk to you
fun.
soon.
See you soon.
See you. Bye.